This is the issue, and I am the ghetto man. Today's issue is a response to all the people that keep insisting that the United States of America is a democratic republic. There's a lot of confusion here. When I pledge my allegiance to the flag, I say, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands. I don't say, and to the democratic republic for which it stands. I say, and to the republic for which it stands. You see, the word democracy doesn't appear anywhere in the pledge now, does it? Nor does it appear in the U.S. Constitution, nor is there any evidence that our nation's founders had anything good to say about democracy. Thomas Paine, the father of the American Revolution, said, "A democracy is the vilest form of government there is." He didn't say it was one of the worst forms of government. He says it was the worst, the vilest form of government that there is. John Adams said, "Remember, democracy never lasts long. It soon wastes, exhausts, and murders itself. There never was a democracy yet that did not commit suicide." John Adams. The United States Constitution. What does it have to say about democracy? Well, let's go to Article 4, Section 4, which states, "The United States shall guarantee to every state in this union a republican form of government." Not a democratic republican form of government, but a republican form of government only. And as I said earlier, nowhere in our history and or in the supreme law of the land, the United States Constitution, do we find the word democracy. And we can't find any reference by our nation's founding fathers that was positive about it. Okay, with that said, during the early years of the 1900s, an anti-American socialist war of ideology came upon the scene, and the word democracy became one of its weapons. Its meaning was deliberately changed and amalgamated with the meaning of the word republic, and was taught in the public schools as one and the same. Okay, public school system, remember what that is. That's the 10th plank of the Communist Manifesto, free education in public schools. What's interesting about this teaching is that a democracy and a republic are diametrically opposed to each other. They are, in fact, direct opposites. So Americans began using the word democracy in place of the word republic to describe our constitutional republic. Now remember, we were all taught this in school. It was every day. Democracy, democracy, democracy. I mean, the only time that I can remember ever saying the word republic was when we pledged our allegiance to the flag. But after that, all we heard was that the United States was a democracy. And when we challenge someone with this fact that we are a republic, what do? They attempt to combine the two. A democratic republic, don't they? Okay, here's where it gets interesting. The creation of this confusion was the brainchild of a new socialist movement that was started in New York in 1905 by about 100 people called the Intercollegiate Socialist Society, the ISS. More than 60 chapters were established on university campuses coast to coast. This is why you see so much of this socialist nonsense in our school system today. The co-directors of this socialist movement were Harry Laidler and Norman Thomas. Now, according to Harry Laidler, the ISS was set up to, quote, "throw light on the worldwide movement of industrial democracy known as," you guessed it, "socialism," unquote. The New York Times published this on January 28, 1919. The ISS, their socialist slogan was, quote, "production for use, not for profit," unquote. The ISS promoted government ownership and control of all means of production and all means of distribution, control of all transportation, all communication, and the control of all of the instruments of commerce. Okay, clearly anybody that reads that can see that this isn't democracy. And as you can see, This is a complete opposite of a free market economy in a constitutional republic. Okay, now with the violence associated with the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, USSR, and I love that, the Union of Socialist Republics. I mean, none of those words, none of those forms of government can even be put together at any time. Well, anyway, with the violence that was associated with the USSR at that time, and that was 1921, the term socialism had earned a strongly repugnant meaning to most of the American people. Now, because of this, the ISS decided to change its name to, quote, listen to this, the League for Industrial Democracy. Okay, now remember, in the minds of the American people, because of the public school system, democracy and a republic mean the same thing. Okay, the word democracy was now going to carry the socialist message that through the nationalization of the means of production and distribution, the state taking private property from its owner for public use or benefit, the nation's wealth, all its natural resources, would now be the property of, quote, all the people, unquote. Hence, the new meaning of democracy. In an industrial democracy, America would enjoy production for use, not for profit. So the word democracy became a tool of socialist deception. Okay, what a mess, huh? Okay, let's go back to the true meaning of democracy and republic. The true meaning can still be found. For example, the U.S. Army's training manual, number 2000-25, this is going back to 1928, had a whole section explaining the difference between a democracy and a republic in its original historical meaning. Okay, it reads as follows. Democracy, a government of the masses, authority derived through mass meetings or other form of direct expression, results in mobocracy. Attitude towards property is communistic, negating property rights. Attitude towards law is the will of the majority shall regulate whether it is based on deliberation or government by passion, prejudice, or impulse without restraint or regard to consequence. Results in demagogism, license, agitation, discontent, and anarchy. Okay, this same government manual defines a republic as authority is derived through the election by the people of public officials best fitted to represent them under the law, the Constitution. Attitude towards property is respect for laws and individual rights and a sensible economic procedure. Attitude toward law is the administration of justice in accord with fixed principles and established evidence with a strict regard for consequences. A greater number of citizens and extent of territory may be brought within its compass. Avoids the dangerous extreme of either tyranny or mobocracy. Results in statesmanship, liberty, reason, justice, contentment, and progress. Now here is the simple definition. Okay, it's very simple. In a democracy, your rights are subject to the will of the majority. In a republic, your rights are protected from the will of the majority. Big difference. And it's much easier to remember the simple definition than it is to go through the others. But anyway, that's the difference between a democracy and a republic. You see, James Madison hit the nail right on the head when he said, democracies have ever been spectacles of turbulence and contention, have ever been found incompatible with the personal security or the rights of property, and have, in general, been as short in their lives as they have been violent in their deaths. And that was James Madison. You can find that in Federalist Paper number 10 on page 81, if you're interested. Even though a democracy and a republic are diametrically opposed to each other, those who would move to destroy the republic began to consistently identify in the press, in the schools, in school books, and especially in the college system, that the United States is a democracy. Even President Wilson helped contribute to the deception when he identified World War I as an effort of Allied forces to make the world safe for democracy. In fact, we still hear politicians use that phrase today, don't we? It's interesting to note that President Wilson had surrounded himself with many of the early participants in the ISS movement. And Wilson was also instrumental in establishing the fifth plank of the Communist Manifesto in the United States, the Federal Reserve banking system, in 1913. By the 1930s, most of the smarter members of the ISS had found their ways into prestigious positions in politics, the press, publishing houses, academic circles, radios, of course the colleges, and the national councils of churches, and they were involved in many other organizations that were there molding public opinion at the time. Other members of the ISS, they wanted the new United States democracy to become a socialist state with the people's consent. They called it democratic socialism, where we heard that term before. And remember, there is no democratic process in socialism. I don't even know how they can mix those two words together, even though democracy is the vilest form of government there is. You're not going to have a democratic or a say in a socialistic system. It's never worked that way. Now, others wanted a mixed system, of part socialism and part free enterprise. And even some of them wised up and they returned to the teaching of our nation's founders. But those who promoted force and violence became leaders in the Communist Party movement. But all of them, including the general public in the United States, continue to refer to our constitutional republic as a democracy. The Communists, the National Socialists of Germany, and the Democratic Socialists in Europe all misused the word democracy, and in time it became meaningless as any form of a descriptive term. It became a euphemism for socialism and communism, where in fact it remains today. At this time, and all over the world, socialist nations, democratic and communist, were in big, big trouble. All of them were on the verge of economic collapse, this in spite of tens of billions of U.S. taxpayer dollars propping them up. And most of them had become totalitarian nightmares filled with violence, torture, starvation, and concentration camps, all used against their own citizens. Socialism was a failure. The best definition of socialism that I've ever been able to find was the definition that Winston Churchill had given it. He said, "Socialism is a philosophy of failure, the creed of ignorance, and the gospel of envy. Its inherent virtue is the equal sharing of misery." You see, the American people have lost their connection with the U.S. Constitution and our Republican form of government and continue to refer to our constitutional republic as a democracy. Look around. The Democratic Party is obsessed with the term. And ironically, the Republicans use the term as well. Even today, when there's no reason to remain ignorant on the subject, people still refer to our republic as a democracy, as if our kind of democracy is a different kind of democracy than everyone else's democracy, when in fact the United States is a constitutional republic and not a democracy at all. And you know what's even more interesting? When this obvious fact is brought to light, those who cling so tightly to democracy will claim that the U.S. is a democratic republic. They just can't let their precious democracy go, can they? I am the Ghetto Man. Thank you for watching. If you're politically correct, then you're legally wrong. And if you're not part of the solution, then you are the problem. Thanks for watching, and please subscribe to my channel.